Welcome to Dad Hammer, Bolters and Booze, where we discuss all things Warhammer while staying hydrated with an adult beverage. I am David the Warboss, and I am joined by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how are we doing?
Oh, we're doing good. I think we've prayed to the machine god and lit all the right incense and did everything we're supposed to do. So I think we're on track now, man.
Good. All technical difficulties have been removed and purged from the galaxy.
Yes, with
That's good.
fire.
I love technology, except when it's terrible. Except when it's terrible. But you know what? Here's my my transition. You know what's not terrible? Warhammer 40,000.
That is not terrible.
So smooth of a transition. Well, we have a phenomenal show for you. We're going to talk about Warhammer 40,000 10th edition index releases. It's here. It's real.
Yay!
It's happening. And we're going to talk about the Space Marine chapters that have come out. We're going to talk a little bit about Chaos, a whole lot about Xenos. Um, anyway,
Potato, potato.
the aliens, yeah. And then we're going to round out the show with some terrain rules discussion for 10th edition and a little bit of controversy that has hit the YouTube scene about specifically terrain rules being quote unquote broken. And we actually disagree about that, so we'll talk about that here in a second. Thank you so much for listening to our show. If you like what you're hearing, please make sure to rate, follow, and subscribe on wherever you follow or wherever you listen, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. You can also find us on social media, but primarily dadhammerpodcast.com. You'll find all of our content there. But first, we're going to start with the most important part of every wargaming podcast, and that is, what are we drinking? Steve, what are you drinking this evening?
Well, in celebration of the Xenos Index release and the one that's near and dear to your heart, the Orcs in particular, I'm drinking an Orc-inspired cocktail that we named the Grot Bomb.
Yeah.
The real drink is a Kentucky Kamikaze, because that's pretty much what a Grot Bomb is. It's a Grot, it's a Grot guided missile.
Yep.
So I looked it up. And, the technical recipe is for vodka, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a little too clean, a little too tasteless. So I just decided that we should probably do something a little bit more orky and went for bourbon instead. It's a real recipe. You can interchange it as you wish.
Right.
So the Grot Bomb is 1.5 ounces of bourbon of your choice, 1 ounce of triple sec, 1 ounce of lime juice, and a lime wedge for garnish. So I think, like I said, the vodka I like to drink is pretty clean and almost tasteless. So I wasn't terribly interested in drinking a straight triple tasted drink. But man, this is really good.
Yeah, vodka really doesn't have much of a flavor. I mean,
Right.
that's my personal opinion, I guess. But vodka is really just something to help dilute your drink a little bit and to give it a spike without altering the flavor much. So I'm with you. Adding in the triple second bourbon sounds pretty good.
It's very Long Island iced tea
Yeah.
kind of flavor.
Did you actually do the lime wedge? Is the lime wedge on there?
Is it gonna hurt our algorithm if I say no?
I was about to say, because whenever there's a lime wedge or an orange peel or anything like that, I'm like, man, I don't want to get a lime out and cut it up and do all of that, and essentially just for one slice or just for the peel. So I end up cheating and just throwing in something else in there. But
I mean, if I had decent folks coming over, like, oh, I don't know, say you came over, you get a lime.
Now wait a minute. Now you're classifying me. You're gone too far. I don't consider myself a quote decent folk.
Well, decent is
decent
just
enough
on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, decent enough. I'll go there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Good enough to let you around my kids.
Yeah, good enough to let me near your liquor cabinet. Okay. Well, very interesting choice of drink, but on brand for what we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to get a little orky. which is always a good time. I am drinking something a little less sophisticated, but it doesn't. It's going to be a beer, but it is from the brewing company in Chattanooga called Hutton and Smith. And I've
Oh,
had, I mean, they make several, and I've had one of these before. This is the Tectonic Session IPA,
oh,
and
nice. I like the
I mean,
name.
I like it. It's actually a lighter IPA. You know, a lot of
Okay.
times I drink hazy IPAs that are a little more
Mm-hmm.
high grav, but this one is a little easier to drink, 5.1%, and to make it even tastier, I'm drinking out of an official Dad Hammer mug, Dad Hammer cup,
Yes, sir.
which is just cool. It just makes me feel more official. So, well, you
Yeah.
enjoy your cocktail. I enjoy my beer. Cheers, sir, and bottoms up.
Cheers.
Well, let's get into some 10th edition news, specifically around the index updates. And man, it just feels like we're right on the eve of 10th edition launching, and I could not be more excited. It's really an exciting time right now. Um, and we'll start the just kind of in order of the releases from the Warcomp site. They first came out with the Space Marine chapters.
Yep.
Some I saw the reactions immediately from the internet hordes, as it were, uh, about, oh no, they ruined my faction, or they didn't include my chapter, or they did this, they did that. And this is not a podcast where we get into that kind of stuff.
No.
Well, you'll hear us say this a lot of times, but we recognize this is a game. This is something
Mm-hmm.
that's fun, that we enjoy, that this is a company making products that we like.
That's
And
right.
the rules and all that stuff are really important to someone like me, because I really like the strategic element. We talked about this on a previous podcast, where I like getting into the game for the strategic stuff, and the rules are really awesome, and I love them. But it's not going to make or break my experience if they happen to nerf something or remove it. I actually like change, so, and I know you're the same way. So we're here for the good times and the booze, of course.
That's right.
Um,
For the ride.
that's right. So with that, we'll start off, and I'll preface this by saying the index that indexes, yeah, that
Yep.
we're going to discuss tonight are primarily going to be the ones that are that we play, that we actually have some knowledge around. There's tons of stuff out there, and we could go line by line. Number one, that would take
Mm-hmm.
forever. Number two, we're not going to have a ton of knowledge, so we just want to speak to the ones that we actually play on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah.
So let's start on the Space Marine chapters. We'll start with you with the Dark Angels. And Steve, I've played against you with the Dark Angels in
Mm-hmm.
ninth, and I am interested to hear what your thoughts are with this new index, the approach, the feel of the army. What are you thinking so far, and what are the main things that stuck out to you?
Well, I feel like for me, it's going to be a lot more user friendly, if that makes sense. Um, they had a lot of cool synergies. They had the first and second companies, the Deathwing, the Raven Wing, and all those things. And the problem is that for me, they were so different in how you played with them and used their synergies and their special tactics and things, that it gets a little muddled up and was a little hard to kind of keep in like a nice flow chart in your head. So
Mm-hmm.
I would always forget little bits of things here and there that were, strategically necessary. Then, I was losing advantages just because I wasn't prepared. And most of that was just bookkeeping,
Yeah.
but this flows better to me. It might feel different when we actually play, uh, but just to kind of go through some highlights, the Grim Resolve is completely different. It feels like I don't remember what ninth was now, but it obviously had nothing to do with objective control stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I think it had something to do with morale tests and all that, which gosh, that was a whole nother bag of cats.
Yeah, I'm so glad those are gone. I'm just
It doesn't bother me at
no
all.
one no one cared about the morale phase, honestly. It was just something that got in the way, and I'm so
It,
glad to see them steer clear that and focus on this objective control stuff and battle
well,
shock.
and we've harped on the whole battle shock thing being important, and we don't know exactly how it's going to be, but when we first looked at it, it's like, oh, battle shock, that's cool. And then as we went on, I was like, man, this is going to be a real deal.
Yeah.
So the main detachment, there's going to be different detachments and how they roll that out. We don't know yet, but the Unforgiven Task Force, their main detachment rule is the Grim Resolve. But this one is, it doesn't matter if your unit gets battle shocked at all anymore. Now you
Mhm.
may go from an OC of 2 down to 1, but the way this is reading, you'll never go below 1. So it says an Adeptus Astartes unit from your army is battle shocked. Change the objective control characteristics of models in that unit to 1 instead of 0.
Yeah, you're not gonna shake them, right? That's
Right.
kinda
So
what yeah.
you're never gonna shake them off an objective. So that may be really important.
That's cool.
Uh, I'm kind of liking that. It doesn't feel like this, like, oh, that's just unbeatable, but that could be the difference between your victory points, in your turn or not.
Mhm.
Um, and then to go on, they have so many good ones. I could just go on and on, but one that struck out at me, the intractable strat. So for 1 CP, you get to use this in your movement phase, and it basically, if you're in combat and decide this is a bad place to be, you can fall back. And usually, when you fall back, you can't do anything else. That's it.
Mhm.
That's all they can do. Now you can spend a CP, fall back, shoot, and then charge.
That's pretty awesome.
I think it's pretty amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, because you could be in combat with say like a character or something who's really strong. You're like, this is not going to go well for me. If I fight again, this is going to go poorly.
Mhm.
So instead of just standing there and taking it, you can fall back, which normally you would fall back and that's all you get. And you'd probably just get charged again and slaughtered. But now you could fall back, shoot, maybe do some more damage, and then charge them again. So I don't know. It feels really cool. You can drop back and soften them up and then go back in. And I think that gives you an idea, an option of doing something really cool.
Yeah, and I love the fact that and we'll talk about this with the next chapter here in a second, but I
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that just the theme of every chapter of every army that's been the thing with 10th edition so far with all the index releases. They're really getting the flavor and
Mm-hmm.
of these armies down, and you feel like you're playing something different versus
Yes.
just doing the same thing over and over again. And I know that was a big point of kind of division when the first Space Marine Index, the generic Space Marine Index, came out for 10th. Everyone thought they were going to lose some of that flavor. When actually, I think they've doubled down on it with these
Mm-hmm.
chapters, and it's I feel it even more now than before. So that's cool with the Dark Angels. That it's almost like they're more stoic, right? They're going to be they're more confident, and they're going to be staying on those objectives. And even if you rough them up and you kind of freak them out a little bit with the battle shock, they're not going to lose sight of what they're there to do from a mission perspective, which I think is really really cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's lore wise, that's what they were. I mean,
Yeah,
they were the
exactly.
first legion. They're the Emperor's Angels of Death. I mean, that's who they sent when the enemy was too tough to crack, right? Because that's just how they would get
Yep.
through it.
Yep.
And they have another one, the Grim Retribution, that I love. That basically, if you get in your opponent's shooting phase, they shoot you, kill a couple models, and it's their phase, but you get to shoot back. Like, it's not even, you get to shoot back as if it's your shooting phase.
Yeah, the return fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to fall across the board. I think a lot of factions are going to have something similar, but
Mhm.
I thought that was really neat, and it just opens up the possibility of these unit combos that I've been thinking, like when I'm sitting doing something that I get to just wander off and just thinking about, like, man, what can I put together now? And we talked about how important characters are going to be and how big it feels like they're making that a thing. They want you to attach these characters, these leadership units, in and embed them in other units. And I was thinking, I thought, man, I could take Azrael, who's a pretty much of a beast anyway, has
Hmm.
some excellent shooting buffs and other things. Put it with 10 Hell Blasters, which I would have never used in Ninth. They cost too much, couldn't get a lot out of them. But put Azrael with 10 Hell Blasters and pack them in a Land Raider and just go driving around riding dirty. I thought that
Now I've
just
got the now I got the song stuck in my head.
see,
Oh
yeah,
man.
that's what I think about when I. This is what kept me out of the good schools, my friend. Uh, and then further on, like you then go to a different aspect away from Green Wing. You have the Death Wing. So you got all these, bone colored Terminators, but you got the Command Squad, which they have. It's basically 3 characters more or less embedded in the unit. You could add 7 other Terminators for a unit of 10, and then you would have 10 Terminators with these amazing buffs. You could get a couple heavy weapon options, and
Yeah.
then you're in the Leviathan box, you're getting the captain and Terminator armor. So attach that captain, and I think you could just have these just amazing thematic dangerous units that they're just going to be so much fun to play. I'm looking forward to it.
I always, whenever I would see the Terminators and the different units that you would put on the table with that, like that Wraithbone color.
Yeah.
It was just so different than other armies, and to me, Dark Angels, even though green is kind of their thing, I like the Wraithbone color along with it to make them stand out, and they feel the Dark Angels with those Terminators feel a little meatier than
Yeah.
maybe some other Space Marine
Like
chapters,
they've
but
seen some stuff.
yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited. I think there's a lot of cool synergies and combos that you can play with Dark Angels. I'm excited to see what you put on the table when you play against the next chapter that we're going to come up with here is Space Wolves, one of the armies that I play. I'm not a huge Space Marine player. I'm more
Mm-hmm.
of a Xenos player, but I did pick up Space Wolves as a chapter because I thought they were a little different, and they're kind of grizzled old guys in the snow, and
Mm-hmm.
I like cold weather. I'm not necessarily big into the hot weather, so I like cold weather, and I'm getting older. I thought, yeah, I can align with that. Um, so the main takeaway, and I don't want to rehash everything with that with just Space Marines in general, but
Mm-hmm.
the big thing that I like about Space Wolves is this notion of these Viking-esque characters sitting around a campfire or a table or something maybe after the battle and talking through all of the tales and beasts that they have slain and how they just overtook the enemy with one fell swoop and being very braggadocious about it, maybe making some stuff up, but that's okay. uh, just getting in there and just being so proud of themselves and so raw with that beast slayer type of mentality.
Oh yeah.
And one of the coolest things that I think they've done with the new detachment rules for Space Wolves is this section called Deeds Worthy of Saga. And they had this in ninth edition, but it
Yeah.
was more around the narrative. In my opinion, it was more of a crusade kind of thing where you could
Right.
build up and say, before the battle, kind of a little bit of a gamble. You would say, I'm going to kill this particular character, or I'm going to take out these people, or I'm going to do this thing during the battle. And then if that happened, you got a bonus or a buff. Well, in 10th edition, one of the biggest changes is that the new rules for deeds worthy of saga, it says at the end of the battle round, you can select one of the sagas listed below. If that saga was completed by your army during that battle round, all Adeptus Astartes models from your army gain the associated benefit until the end of the battle. You can only select
Nice.
each saga once per battle. So at the end of a round, let's say end of round one, round two, and you say, you know what, I'm really close to, a really one of the Tyrannid monsters, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's maybe it's halfway down on its wounds, and I think I'm going to be able to take it out. While at the end of the battle round, I can assess what that's going to be, and now I'm going to turn around to look at my companions in the Space Wolf army and say, I'm going to take this thing down, and if I do, I get the bonus. I get the benefit of that. And then the benefit for the Beast Slayer, for example, melee weapons equipped by Adeptus Astartes models in your army have the lethal hits ability. So, I don't know how all this is going to play on in game, but that's
It's gonna
okay.
be cool though.
I just the theme around it, the
Yeah.
stories about Space Wolves, Dark Angels, the same way, feels so thematic, and there is a difference in feel between Dark Angels and Space Wolves with how they play, the rules they get, the buffs that they receive,
Hmm.
and I think they've done a really outstanding job. And I'm not going to get into all the numbers and the stats and
No,
math
that's
hammer this
a
to death.
little pointless.
I really am not. I mean, we play this for fun,
Hmm.
and the models look cool. The abilities sound awesome. If that means the army is less than, great, I guess, and it's a little more difficult to take down your opponent, or maybe you don't. It's not very easy to.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we play the game, and I'm just excited to experience this story around these
Yeah.
armies.
We'll continue the honor grudge between the two
That's
factions.
right. That's right. Well, very excited about the Space Marine chapters. Let's skip over now very quickly to the Chaos factions. And I say very quickly, not that they're not cool. There's a ton of awesome Chaos stuff.
Hmm.
I just recently started collecting the Chaos Space Marines. I painted up several. I've got Vashtor here in front of me, and I did look at his rules on the data sheet. I know I'm not a stats guy, and I doom and gloom, but I did look at his stats, and I'm like, yeah, these are okay. I mean, he doesn't do anything crazy amazing for the
Yeah.
model that he is, with these spiked wings and hammer
Uh
and crazy face and, and all this.
huh.
And he looks incredibly menacing. And then his stats are like, yeah, okay, it's like a demon prince, but I don't know. I'll probably put him on the table just because he looks cool and he's very imposing.
Well, if the
Um,
points are right.
yeah, that's possible. I guess if the points are low,
Hmm.
then he'd be somebody I'd put on the table. But even I, with ninth edition, I remember for orcs they kind of nerfed the Morkanaut and Gorkanaut, where they weren't as
Uh huh.
viable, made them more expensive, and so I didn't run them as much, but I still did it anyway just because I think the models look cool. So I'll probably do the
Yeah.
same thing with Vashtor. Um, but I I the Chaos Space Marines I'm getting up to speed on.
Yeah.
I like
There's
them
some cool
quite a bit.
stuff.
Yeah.
They feel like the Slaves to Darkness AOS army I'm building. There's a lot of the rules that are very sort of cross platform, if you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
mark of chaos and stuff. You kind of pick and choose your path.
Yep.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. There's some cool rules. I can't speak to them really.
Hmm.
I can read about them and we can talk about them, but really where we get into this stuff is just by playing. I'll also speak quickly on the Thousand Sons. Yeah, this was an army that one of our mutual friends plays, and I was asking him his opinion just on the index. He was really excited about it, even though
Hmm.
they removed the psychic phase, which he was very concerned about. Because I mean they're a psychic army, but
Yeah.
they took all those psychic abilities, stuck them in the ranged weapons, and it still feels very psychic heavy. But
Okay.
I would say his opinion overall was very positive, and there's a lot of synergies at play where you need to keep close to your characters, so that you get the benefits of re-rolls and things like that,
Mm.
just like with every other army. But I again, not a Thousand Sons player, but I was interested to hear his take to see if he was doom and gloom because they
Yeah.
removed the psychic phase, and so far he seems to be pretty optimistic about it, so
Well, I'm
we'll see
glad
there
that
as
he
well.
turned the corner on that. That's good. That's really
Yeah,
good.
and we also talked about, as someone who's not a heavy psychic army player, I
Right.
like the fact that when in ninth and eighth, whenever I played against Thousand Sons, what was just so is great for him, not so much for me, during the psychic phase, because they're mortal wounds, you just don't do anything. I can't save, no matter of
Right.
strategy, no matter of hiding. it's not going to matter. You just, if I can see you for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
then and I roll and you don't have any psychers to deny the witch, you're done. You're just going to take mortal wounds, and that round is about removing models off the board. You know,
That's right.
so at
Well,
least
and
now I have a fighting chance.
yeah, and bad for him. He's got to get through the command phase and the whole battle shock stuff. But I don't know what kind of abilities that team has necessarily. But now you may get some of these interruptive kind of stratagems where you
Hmm.
can use in his shooting phase, like some of the ones with the Dark Angels we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. It,
You got
it
to pay
feels like
for them, but
the psychic abilities aren't so isolated and
Mm-hmm.
untouchable now. Um, for heavy psyker armies, that's probably not the best news. But I personally feel like it creates more of a dynamic of the game and a back and
Right.
forth, so that there is an offense and defense element, and it's not just all offense during the psychic phase. Whereas it was
That's right.
before. Well, let's skip over now to the Xenos section, and I'll go first, and then
Okay.
we'll hit Necrons. I'll talk about orcs really quickly. Orcs was my first army that I ever played. It's how I got introduced to 40k. I've got around probably 3,500 points or so of orcs, which is still
Wow.
not a lot, I guess, compared to some. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
but very interested to see what the index is going to look like. I gotta catch myself. I was getting ready to say codex. The index. Some of the rules we've already gone over, but there were a couple. Just my general take for our audience here. I played Evil Sons from as an orc player. I liked the Mad Max theme, the aesthetic of just putting some crazy orc boys in a vehicle and just throwing them straight up the board and
Yeah.
trying to get into the opponent's face as quickly as you can, then jump out melee, doing the jump, pulling, doing the choke point sandwich in between and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the orc strategy, and so I was really interested to see, especially with the detachments coming out, are they going to lean into any of that? Are they going to bake some of the evil sons rules where red ones go faster, as we all
I was
know?
gonna say, you'll surely get a speed freaks kind of deal.
Yeah, but they really didn't. At least in the index,
Mm.
they've removed that. However, I'll do the caveat. They're starting with only one detachment, just like everybody else,
Right.
and they're not putting in any type of Evil Sun's abilities baked into something like a rocket truck, squig buggy, or shock jump dragster or anything like that. They're not baking those Evil Sun's abilities into there. But you got to think that they're going to do this with the codex. That's what the codex is going to be for. They're going to
Yeah.
come out with the codex. They're going to have 5 or 6 detachments that you can pull from, and they're going to give you all the buffs and abilities that you want. So if you wanted to run a Speed Freaks, for example, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to run that, then those abilities and buffs are going to be there. So I'm optimistic about that. I'm not, there's no problems for me. One other thing that I noticed with the on the data sheets, the Orc Boys no longer have a T-shirt save, no
Oh,
longer a
that's
6-up
good.
save. It's now a 5-up save. Still not
Hey.
great, but better than before. And then there is a stratagem. I'm sorry, not a stratagem. Just an ability that the Orc Boys have built into their data sheet called Breaking Heads, where if
Mm-hmm.
you had a Warboss leading the unit in the command phase, that whenever there is a battle shock test failed, that you can essentially remove one of the bodyguard models of that unit, and then you can
Okay.
re-roll the test.
Hey, that's
So,
nice.
and previous it was to help with morale failure, and then you would still have to lose some models, but just wouldn't be as bad. I didn't use it a ton; it was more situational. This
Mm-hmm.
seems a little more viable, and you're only losing one model. So,
That's
anyway,
exciting.
that's my take on orcs. As a big orc player, I'm very excited. I think they still kept the theme of them. Looking forward to playing them in the future. All right, let's skip over to Necrons. I have some Necrons. I've only played them a
Mm-hmm.
couple of times, and I know that you have collected Necrons, but have played a few times. But you're going to have a little more experience than I have. So, Steve, what have you seen with the index, and maybe some standouts for you?
Yeah, I probably have around 2,000 ish points ish of Necrons. I have a little over 500, playable right now. So I've played really small games, and honestly, they're not a great army in that 500 point range. At least in ninth rules,
Yeah.
it's just hard to play them. Um, but the reanimation protocols are still there, which is good because you're putting wounds back on models. What I like about this, from what I could wrap my head around the previous version, is this newer version. It looks like you can help your multi wound models more.
Hmm.
So previously, it felt like, well, it was great for warriors, um, and immortals and things that had one wound, not so hot for things that had three or more wounds. So, but now it feels like now you're adding wounds back, because I could be wrong, but I feel like the previous edition, you had to be able to roll enough on your dice roll to get an entire model back.
Yeah.
So if you had a 3 wound model and you only had 2 wounds left to apply, you didn't get anything. It was basically wasted. I could be wrong about that,
No,
but that's what
I think that's accurate. I think the new
yeah.
reanimation protocols allow you to. It's a healing mechanism
Hmm.
versus just a resurrection dead model type of a rule.
And I
Now
think that's
it's
what good.
you, yeah, it's more of a healing, which you can still have your cake and eat it too, right? You can resurrect
Yeah.
dead models because they need healing, but you can also heal wounded models that are still on the table. So, reanimation protocol is just a reanimation of wounds
Yeah.
versus just reanimation of dead bodies, which I think is a cool alteration to the rule.
It's going to be harder to chip away at units with
Yeah,
that now.
yeah, for sure.
Um, The command protocols are now like stratagems. So if I remember in ninth, you had to take your command protocols, you picked the order of which battle round you were gonna use them in.
So
So
so confusing. I
oh my
just
god, it was so hard. It was like combat doctrines, which was
oh
hard enough, but it was pretty much set, right? Now
yeah,
this one, you picked them and you wrote them down. I was like, well, I flailed so much because
yeah.
I was like, oh, I've got that, and I never used it. And they're integral. They were integral in ninth to buffing your army and helping them move along and survive, those rounds.
Hmm.
Now they're command point stratagems, so you can pick what you want.
Yeah, I love it.
And just the protocol of the Eternal Guardian is, I just love this one, man. You can take an infantry character, if they're destroyed, and then if you just basically spend a CP and set them back up on the battlefield as close as possible to where it was destroyed, an inch away from all enemy models, and they come back with half the number of its starting wounds.
Jeez.
That is great.
It's
I
really
mean,
cool though. I
if
mean,
you
it
have like
feels it feels Necron, just
it's just
in
perfect.
general. It feels very Necron.
Yes. And to my next point, like if you get Illuminor Xeris, which I don't have that model. Now I want that model because I looked at the data sheet, and he is just going to be a murder machine.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think it's like 9 wounds or something like that. Go
Hmm.
ahead, kill him. I'll throw a CP out there and come back with 4 or 5 or however you divvy it out, and then he just commences to back to doing what he was doing before. And same thing with the Satan. But now I guess it have to be an infantry character. So I didn't look close at the keywords, so that might be this might be limited to things like lords and overlords, and
Hmm.
maybe a catacomb command bard or something like that. But I just have to look a little deeper into it. But it got me daydreaming.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, right now it's easy to get excited
yeah,
for, and it's like we're not really gonna know until we really
right,
start playing. Hopefully, the points come out maybe potentially tomorrow.
yeah,
But as of this recording, I'm really hopeful that we're gonna be able to get some games in, and then we can come back and talk about this a little more about our experiences.
yeah,
So. Um, the one thing I wanted to say right before we move to the next chapter, the next faction, is you mentioned you didn't have Illuminor Caesaris. I have that model, and
yeah.
it was a huge pain in the butt to put together.
It looks like it.
Oh my gosh, it has like this where the model looks really awesome. He's
Yeah.
using psychic powers to remove, I guess, a soul, almost like Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat. But
Yeah.
that goop, that beam of the soul or something,
Mm-hmm.
is attached to the like 3 different places, and it's
Ugh,
so thin and spindly. It's really difficult to put together, and it broke off so many times. And if you
I
look
can
at it
only
now, you
imagine.
probably wouldn't know, but I super glued the mess out of that thing. So it's extra goopy now because it looks like just a giant mold of super glue. But
That's so funny.
anyway, just FYI, if you get that model, you're be ready with an extra set of hands somewhere.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, we got one more Xenos faction to talk about, and that is we saved the best and shortest for last, and that is the leagues of Votan. I I'll just do I talk probably way too much. Nobody really cares that much about the leagues of Votan. I do. I like them, but they're the hot take, I guess, if you will, on the Votan. Lots of judgment, even more than I thought. More judgment tokens. Really, it's just more opportunities to
Yeah,
hand
I
out
looked at that.
judgment tokens. And then there's a lot of synergies with that. So a lot of they're actually a little more complex now than they were in ninth edition, where before you just kind of handed out the judgment tokens and then your shots were buffed. End of
Mm-hmm.
story. Now there's more stuff with that you can do. If they have a judgment token, if they have 2 judgment, if they have this, if they have that, then you get these extra bonuses and buffs. So really, the goal, even more so than before, is just to pile on the judgment tokens as quickly as you can.
Okay.
And there's some extra abilities that I wanted to highlight. One is called a long list, which I just like the picture in my head. Somebody with
There's
the giant
Santa.
Santa Claus list scroll going down, like, and with the monocle.
Yeah.
Let me
Naughty.
regale you with names on this list. Um, but there's called a long list, and essentially all it is that once you put a judgment token on someone, you
Mm-hmm.
add a second judgment token to another unit you can see. So it's like
Ooh.
you get judged for doing whatever, and then, oh, I
Boy,
see you over there in the corner.
you get
You also get
judged.
judged. The other there was a stratagem called Wayfarer's Grace, where
Mm-hmm.
essentially it allows you to spend that CP, and on death of I believe it's a character,
Okay.
you get to roll, and if it's a 2+, you keep them alive with full wounds.
Oh no.
So pretty, I think you can only use that once. It's kind of
Still.
a one shot, but yeah, pretty awesome. It's not like Reanimation Protocol where you can do it with everybody. It's just
Yeah.
going to be this one guy, but they're pretty cool. Um,
You got some pretty good one guys in that army, though.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I mean, a handful. It's not as
Yeah.
extensive as some others, but the Grimnir, which is the psyker, is only
Mhm.
has 1 psychic power now, and I've seen a lot of people complaining about that. I actually like that. I hate going back into the codex and
Yeah.
looking up all the psychic powers and trying to make that decision. Just tell me what I get.
I
And
just need smite. That's all I need.
yeah, well, yeah, of course, I guess everybody has smite. I would assume.
Yeah.
I didn't even look that
Yeah, they
up, but
do. Yeah.
so I have smite and then 1 psychic power
Right.
with the Grimnir, which I love. The Magna Rail, which was a big,
Uh,
everybody that I
I
played against
hate the
hated the
Magna
Magna
Rail.
Rail. Um, Now it's not as strong, but it is a 5+ to hit now, which you get 1 shot, 5 up. Now there is an ability with the um, Uther the Destined. If you have that character, you can turn things into an automatic 6. That ability's still there. But
Mm-hmm.
on a 5 up, if I hit, it does have the devastating wounds ability, which means if I roll a 6 to wound, so I could use Uther the Destined to flip that to a 6. If I roll a
Mm-hmm.
6 to wound, that becomes mortal wounds equal to the damage characteristic, and the damage
Dang,
characteristic
gum.
is, yeah, it's pretty spicy. The damage characteristic on the Magna Rail is D3 plus 3. So at most, what do you, I guess 6 wounds potentially, but those could be
Yeah.
mortal.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of rolls you got to get to before that. But
Yeah, but you're talking like one battle line guy could
yeah.
maybe one shot a unit of 5, depending on the wound characteristic.
Hmm. Yeah.
Ugh.
and
Great.
I'm excited to play Votan as always. Uh, but just to kind of wrap up this segment with the index releases, I think we can both agree right now we're definitely caught up in the hype, but even after we start playing some games and maybe we find out that some of these units aren't as quote unquote powerful or as awesome maybe as we thought, it's not going to take away the theme and the flavor of each of these
Mm-mm.
armies, which I think they have done. Games Workshop has done an outstanding job doubling down on that with each of these factions.
And I think for me too, it may be because we're doing this podcast and we talk about rules now and we're just chit
Right.
chatting it and fleshing it out a little bit more. The way this is set up, it feels like I am going to be able to flowchart this in my head,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just going to like, all right, if then this, if then that, and it's just going to be just so much more fun to play
I agree.
because I think we're going to have our eyes on the board and not in the book.
Yep. Which is the preference, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, exciting times. Looking forward to playing some Warhammer 40,000 very, very soon with all these armies.
Yes.
Let's now get into some terrain rules discussion, and wanted to talk about this. Those are in the core rules, and you can read through those. There's nothing crazy there, but reason we wanted to discuss is, Steve, you brought up something that you had seen on YouTube, and I've seen it on Reddit as well. The quote unquote controversy that
Yeah.
we've seen some people say that the terrain rules are broken.
Ugh,
Um,
I almost
and
hate that word.
and I'm not going to spend a lot of time about that because I disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Is it broken, meaning that you can't play 40,000 10th edition with terrain? Absolutely not. I think this is the intent is there, and
Yep.
it's important to remember that this is a game. It is a game that people
Yes.
play for fun, just like any other game that you would play. And a lot of times you have to house rule things. The only difference with Warhammer and any other game, I mean, I'm even talking like, chess
Yeah.
or
Checkers.
Monopoly, the game of life, right? The
Mm-hmm.
actual board game of life. You
That's
remember
right.
that?
Yeah.
There's so many house rules, and you come up with house rules, and that's just kind of part of it. The only difference with that is that you don't really have a Monopoly tournament scene. Or maybe there is, I'm just not aware of it.
Who
But
knows?
the tournament scene is a small minority of the overall Warhammer community, but they're the most vocal. And for us, on this podcast, we're here to have a good time, to enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
game. And I look at these rules and focus on the intent and to say, okay, this is not. Let's not get too involved. Let's just stick with what the goal of this rule was. So
Yeah.
that's all we'll say on the controversy. I did want to get more into the actual rule, so let's talk about the benefits of terrain, which is more importantly the benefits of cover.
Mm-hmm.
So the benefits of cover, for anyone that hasn't read up on all these rules, the benefits of cover is a +1 to your saving throws. So if you gain the benefits of cover, and you're gonna hear us talk about that a lot, you get a +1 to your saving throw. That's it. Period. No extra buffs or anything else.
Easy
+1 to your
enough.
saving throw. Yep. The only difference is if the model has a 3-up save already, you cannot have benefits of cover against AP 0. So if nothing
Okay.
has AP on the attack and they're shooting you and you have a decent save,
Mm-hmm.
already, uh, you don't get the benefits of cover. So you can't go to a 2 plus against something
Okay.
that is like, I don't know, I guess a pistol or something that's not going to
Yeah.
have high AP, which makes sense.
Yeah. Keeps you from parking these like, high killy things in a forest or
Mm-hmm.
something and
Mm-hmm. I'm sure
can't ever
someone
be
will
hurt.
come up with a way to get around it,
Oh,
but
you know it's coming.
we're gonna hit on each of the different types of terrain and talk about a couple things that are notable. The craters and rubble are first, and looking through the core rules, as a terrain guy who's really excited about terrain, I am very hopeful that within the first month they actually release an official terrain kit for craters.
Oh man, that'd be great.
Yeah, it looks awesome. And yes, even though it's just a crater, I get excited about that stuff because I don't know, I just do. But the benefit of cover there is that you have to be wholly within, infantry only. So don't park your dreadnoughts in there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Easy enough.
Infantry only, wholly within. You get the benefits of cover, and I I like this rule. And there's no
Hmm.
penalty to movement anymore. At least I haven't seen that. There's no -2 to your move or going over or craters or anything like that. So I think it's just the benefit of cover. Steve, any thoughts on this at all?
No, I think that's really cool. I was watching Play on Tabletop. I think they
Mm-hmm.
have a
Mm-hmm.
little primer guide to how to play Warhammer 40k 10th edition, which I highly recommend. We'll have to put it in the show notes because it's a really good
Yeah,
video.
absolutely.
They did one for ninth, which was fantastic, and they actually had a crater on there, and they used it as we're speaking to, and I was like, yeah, that's great. It's just fantastic. I love it because I don't think we would have used it much in ninth, if I remember right. I don't know if it did anything really, but slow you down,
No,
right?
we put craters down, and I have
Mm-hmm.
some that were 3D printed, but we
Mm-hmm.
put craters down, and they really just kind of got in the way. They were a way
Yeah.
to limit the movement of charging units, essentially, because they gave you a penalty to your movement. So now they've removed that, and now it's something that you can actually bunker in if you're
Yeah.
infantry, which I think
I
is
think it's
cool.
good. I do too.
Next terrain category, if that's what we're going to go with, we're going to category
Mm-hmm.
pipes and barricades. So with pipes and barricades, you can move over them freely. There's no more restriction to that. These are pipes and barricades are 2 inches or lower. So
Okay.
the new
Gotcha.
rule with terrain in general is that models can move freely over terrain that's less than 2 inches tall, which
Reasonable.
I like that because it removes some unnecessary complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move freely over there, but the really important thing is that you can charge models on the opposite side, and you could do this with ninth, but it was a little more difficult and again to me situational.
Right.
This time, you get the benefits of cover if you're wholly within 3 inches of these pipes and barricades, and you're not fully visible to every attacking model. So if
Okay.
you've got a squad of orc boys shooting at some Necron warriors, and you've got maybe part of them covered by the barricade, but still the whole unit is wholly within 3 inches of the barricade,
Mm-hmm.
then you will receive the benefits of cover with that. So you'll get the
Yeah.
+1 to save, and then I can charges what orc boys would do. Um, Charge into you as long as you're within an inch or two, I think, of the pipes and barricades.
Yeah. I think that's really cool.
So pretty cool. Next is the debris and statues. Not a lot of statues. I'm hoping that they come out with more
Yeah.
statues.
Me too.
Have you
If
have
not,
you
we're
seen the ones with the and I can't remember what terrain set it's from, but it was like with the sword and shield statue.
yeah. I've seen those.
They show them in the core rules all the
I
time,
know.
and I'm looking at the book right now and I see them. I'm like, yeah, what are you going to re-release those?
Well, I know a guy that could maybe make some.
Shh!
I got a guy,
Don't.
man.
We don't speak of it. No, I know. Honestly, I always forget that you have a 3D printer and you can totally
yeah.
make those for me.
But you know,
We might have to
it's
talk.
yeah. I haven't looked for those files yet, but again, that the video I just referenced, and there was a statue in the middle. Used it
Yep.
just exactly
Yep.
what we're talking about. I was like, oh, need more statues.
Yep. So debris and statues, nothing fancy here. You get the benefit of cover if you're not fully visible. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
hiding behind, you get the benefits.
Easy enough.
Next is the kind of several of these hill
Mm-hmm.
structures, sealed buildings, and containers.
Okay.
So bit of a mouthful, right? Um, but really, you can climb on top of these just like you could before. Think about containers. Their
Yeah.
structures now are those one level terrain bits that they've come out with recently.
Yeah,
I
like
don't.
those hab blocks or
Yeah,
whatever they. Yeah.
by themselves, I don't think they look good, but when you put all the
Mm-hmm.
fencing and the satellite stuff around it, that appeals
Yeah,
to me. The only thing I don't like is it's just a little low. It's a little short. I wish it
I
were
gotcha.
taller. But anyway, you can climb on top of them. That's pretty cool to get a vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
And you get the benefits of cover if you're not fully visible. So same thing as before. Next up is the woods category, and they talk about at the very beginning to on the woods, and the next one would be ruins. They talk about in the book about deciding of the footprint. What's the footprint of the
Yeah.
woods going to be? So
Right.
something that I want to just advise to anyone that's looking into getting in terrain, and we're going to do a podcast dedicated to terrain and building and getting that created. I've actually gotten into a lot, built rocks and ruins and different things, and have a ton of terrain now. But the footprint you can use, I recommend some hardboard that you can find at your hardware store, for those in the
Right.
states like Home Depot. It's about a quarter of an inch thick hardboard, and then you just cut out with a jigsaw. And then I've taken my trees that you can get, those are the Age of Sigmar trees, and glue those down in a circle on top of that board, and then you put flock on that, and that is your footprint. So now
Mm-hmm.
there's no question about what the footprint is, which then you don't have to worry about moving around the trees and everything. It's just here's the woods, bam, and stick it on the board.
Yeah, and I think as long as you all agree to it, man, this is gonna be. It's actually gonna be easier than what we had to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, and then the rules for the woods. If you're wholly within, you get the benefits of cover. It's a
Mm-hmm.
common theme. And then if you're attacking on either side, so let's say neither one of us are actually in the trees, benefit of cover is granted to both sides. So
That's
it's not
nice.
obscuring. I can shoot through the trees, makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, but you both get a +1 to save,
Man,
which
that's
I
that's gonna
think
be
is a good.
fun.
Yeah, makes sense.
I can envision a board with like you make some rolling hills, bunch of craters, got some woods, and that's it.
Yeah, I
I could see
mean,
playing that way. Be fun.
back in the day with Warhammer Fantasy, they had hills. I mean, hills were
Yeah.
a thing. Um, I don't I don't see that happening really with 40k. I mean, hills
Probably
don't.
not.
I don't think of the grim dark future with rolling hills.
Not a lot. No.
It's like the Windows XP background with a grim dark future. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
accidentally some alien world.
yeah, some dead beast where
Yeah.
that's your hill,
Uh
maybe.
huh.
Um,
Maybe.
but the next up is the ruins, which has the same thing about deciding a footprint. Same thing as before. I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend getting some hardboard, putting your ruin on top of that. The only downfall is that you can't, if it's a multi-part ruin, where it's got
Yeah,
some barricades along with it. Once you've glued it down, it's not really going anywhere. You can make a
that's right.
modular, but for me, I just like having it all in one and just saying, here's the ruin. Um, you the This is probably the one with the most, the most rule set going along with it. So if you're in the ruin, you get, first of all, you get negative -1 to AP if you are 6 inches vertically above your opponent. So if they are down the surface level and you're on the second or third level of the ruin,
Okay.
um, you actually get a bonus to your AP. A bonus
Is that
meaning
the
a -1.
is that the plunging fire rule? I
Yes.
think that's on the. Okay.
Yeah, similar to Kill Team, where they give you some
Mm-hmm.
benefits to having height advantage.
Yeah.
Very similar here, which I like that they're doing that. Hopefully, that means we're going to get some multi-level ruins
Yeah. Me
more.
too.
Yeah. And then just like in before, your infantry beasts can break through the walls. They can do the Kool-Aid Man through the walls of
Oh,
the
okay.
ruins, ignoring those, walk right through them,
Cool.
and then they can be set up on higher floors. And then, of course, you get the benefits of cover if you are wholly within. So if
Okay.
you're wholly within, you get your +1. If you are not and you're on either side, it is obscuring. So think of a giant rectangle of blackness, that you can't see through.
No
It
shooting through windows and
That's
etc.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so
unless
good.
you're in the ruin, and that's where some of
Gotcha.
the controversy has come in. Like, as the way the rules are written, I
Mm-hmm.
think the intent is to ensure that you can't shoot through the windows. But really, it's like if you're touching the ruin, I think you should
Mm-hmm.
be able to shoot through it. You just won't get the benefits of cover. And
Yeah.
that's the easy way to do it.
Yeah.
They'll probably FAQ it and to make it more specific, because you got people out there that are gonna try to cheat the game. But the intent, I think, is
Yeah.
just to say, dip your toe into the corner of the ruin. You don't get the benefit of cover, but you can shoot through it. I think that makes sense.
I think it's fine. And like I said, you house rule it and make it easy and simple as long as it, is true to the intent. I think the way these rules are set up, I feel like it's just going to be easier to everybody agree on, because it's the one thing that is a steady constant. It affects you just like it affects me. As long as we agree to where those boundaries are, no biggie.
Yeah, agreed. And Steve, any kind of wrap up thoughts around terrain and maybe what you're looking forward to? It's not a ton that's different from ninth, except I think they've simplified where they could. They've removed some rules where it made sense, and I like that they're just making it a flat saving bonus with the benefit of cover.
Yeah, I feel like in ninth you weren't forced or required, but I feel like L-shaped buildings, like single level L-shaped buildings, was good enough.
Yeah.
Like there's no benefit to having climbing 2 levels. There was no benefit to having trees. There was no benefit to having craters. I feel like now all those little bits that kind of help the immersion matter, and I think it's just going to be much more fun to play. Like we're saying, you could do a whole wooded scene if you wanted to, like make some alien dead forest, or just like the trailer for 10th with the jungle scene. Make a
Mm-hmm.
whole jungle motif if you want to, or do some sort of like sci-fi, outpost kind of looking thing. So you don't have to go down the like, oh, this is a wrecked city and these are just L-shaped buildings and some barricades and pipes, because it just felt in ninth that's just sort of where it funneled. You might as well do that because that was the easiest way to get through the game. It just didn't feel like the terrain was written in as an important character. Now it feels like a non-player character. Like all the cool NPCs in a video game that make a
Mm-hmm.
video game fun. That's what the terrain's going to feel. It feels like to me, looking at it for the 10th.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I like about the verticality, they're actually adding some
Mm-hmm.
rules in for verticality, because they've added so many deep strike abilities,
Yeah.
and teleport abilities. Because I have eliminators, the
Mm-hmm.
snipers for Space Marines, and if I'm able to deep strike them and put them somewhere, I'm always going to put them on the top floor. That's just natural. I want to put them on the top floors so they can see through the window. And now I actually have a reason to. Now I get a
Oh,
benefit. I get to add
no
the
kidding.
AP to it. Um,
And they get cover.
exactly. And with the deep strike ability, I get the +1 to cover and -1 to AP. So
Mm.
you better believe that when I'm rolling out those eliminators, they're going on
Yes.
top of the statue. you
Shoot,
know,
yeah, man. I
if they'll
don't
fit.
disagree at all.
They're going on top of the top floor, the
Mm-hmm.
penthouse suite. Well, terrain, I agree, is very much an NPC. It's a part of the game now. Exciting to see what they're going to do, and I'm even more excited to see what kind of new terrain they come out with. Hopefully, this means they're going to come back with some of the Gothic ruins, the multi-level ruins,
Yeah.
where you can piece those together and really make a destroyed city that you want.
Gosh, it didn't even dawn on me till this conversation that could be a thing.
Hmm. No, I saw it in the core rules. They had a picture of example battlefields, and I saw
Oh
all
man.
these multi-level buildings. I'm like, oh snap! You got to bring those back.
save my save my allowance.
That's right. Well, that will wrap up our show for this episode of Dad Hammer Bolters and Booze. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Medicae Steve. I hope you enjoyed your Grot Bomb cocktail. How was it?
Oh, it was fantastic. Very grotty and a little bit balmy.
That sounds gross. Well, thank you for listening. And thank you to this delicious beer that I have just finished. I am the Warboss, and we will see you next time on Dad Hammer. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, man.